Welcome one more again to the webinar Case Studies and Best Practice in Universities, Project Management. Today we speak about South Africa. It's really nice to have our experts. My name is Veniamin Kizeev. I'm a global head of Smarter University SIG IPMA, and today I am a moderator of this webinar. First of all, a few words about us, very short. The Smarter U SIG IPMA exists to promote professional project management in university life. We always think only about that. And we are trying to connecting university leaders and teams and delivering best practice around the world. And if you have any question and some suggestion, please contact us. I always tell this, and it's really nice to have a lot of emails from you. It's really super with different topics, different thoughts and feedbacks. It's really nice. Please do it. This webinar is a part of a series of webinars on the best practice of developing project management at universities across different countries. We had experience from Germany, from Nepal, from US. And today, how I said, we will look at the South Africa experience. Our agenda, very simple, short introduction, presentation from our expert, and discussion. And I think that all duration less than 1 hour. Today we have great experts, Professor Taryn Bond-Barnard. Professor Taryn is an state professor in the Department of Industrial Engineering at Stellenbosch University from, I think from Cape Town. I'm not sure, but from Cape Town. It's my second city in the world. I was in Cape Town a few years ago. It's an unbelievable place. Professor Taryn has received several prestigious awards, and it's worth to say that she also have awards from IPMA Global Young Research Award in 2018. It's very nice for us, and also different recognition in other topics, other sphere. And she's a professional. She's a certified Prince 2 practitioner, project management professional PMP, and a registered professional engineer with ECSA. It's always nice to see that some person have experience in different organization in different part of the world. We'll be glad to your question. Please using chat or section for Q&A. It's up to you. And let's start. Professor Taryn, thank you for your readiness. First of all, share the best practice, and the floor is yours. I stop the screen and give you rights for do this. Okay.
Thank you, Venaman. Thanks for the kind introduction.
I suppose I stop my screen.
Yes. You must just stop your screen sharing, then I'll share my screen.
Okay. Can you just start sharing because I see that
I'm not able to. It says you can't start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing. I think it's just got to do that. There we go.
I found this button.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you. Can you see my screen? Okay. Can you see that screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone, from this very sunny and hot South Africa. We, in our hottest month here, we averaging days of about 34 degrees Celsius. So yes, it's very hot here, and I know many of you are in much cooler climates. I'm longing to be in a cooler climate at this moment, but welcome. I will be speaking specifically about the South African context and teaching project management, particularly at a postgraduate level. And that because that is where my experience lies, with particular reference to Stellenbosch University. I won't speak for other universities in South Africa, although I have worked at the University of Pretoria as well, but I'll just share with you my insights and the things that I found valuable and that you might also find useful if you are also a lecturer in project management. So just a brief agenda. I'll just briefly say something about sort of my teaching background. Then just the teaching context, because I think context is so important when one's looking at project management and teaching students in project management. And I think South Africa has a unique context that you have to cater for. Then I'll look at learning and assessment and share with you some examples of learning and assessment that I use in my modules. Then I had quite a big class last year of postgrad students, and as part of their final individual assignments, they had to provide me with a consolidated reflection on their learnings. And I analyze some of those reflections, and I'll then provide you with what they found. So this is from their point of view, what they found key project management learnings based on the module that I taught them, what they found being working practitioners, what for them was of relevance for their career as engineers and project managers, what stood out to them in terms of the project management content, and then value assessment, looking at everything I covered in my module, what they found useful, what they didn't find so useful, that kind of thing. And then I'll just conclude with sharing some upside and downside things that I've been thinking about, particularly the South African context, but also all of us teachers, challenges we face. And I'd be very interested to hear your insights and thoughts on those topics. Okay, so Benjamin has already said quite a bit. So one thing that he maybe didn't mention is that in addition to being an associate professor in the Department of Industrial Engineering, one of the big parts of my job is being the academic program coordinator for a pretty young structured master's in engineering management program at Stellenbosch University. When I say pretty young, it's now only in its 4th year. So I joined 2 years back. And we've grown the program quite, it's grown very naturally, but it's quite a big program now. And I oversee the program. I also teach project management on this engineering management program. In terms of my teaching experience, I've been teaching project management at a postgrad level since 2013. Back then, I was doing my PhD part-time, and I taught at the University of Pretoria. I taught an honors level project management course. And since then, I've been teaching project management ever since. I was in industry for 8 years. So I studied industrial engineering. Then I worked as an engineer for 8 years in industry. During that time, I did my structured master's in project management part-time through the University of Pretoria. I also did my PhD part-time. And now I run a program that only caters for part-time students. So I think I have a particular interest and passion for part-time students that are trying to further their careers, because it has some very unique challenges if you're studying part-time and you're working full-time. And I've myself been through that journey. So yeah, I really resonate with these type of students. Currently, I teach 2 project management modules at the University of Stellenbosch, both at postgrad level. The one is a faculty-wide project management module that typically takes place here from May to about July. It caters for all the directions or the disciplines in engineering. So mechanical, mechatronic, electrical, electronic, civil, process or chemical, industrial. So all the students from the other disciplines may take this module. And I typically teach that in a block week format, meaning beforehand they get some pre-reading to do and an assignment to do individually, which they hand in. And then they come and attend a block week on campus. Half of the class attend the block week, so I see them in front of me. And then at the same time, I stream my lecture live online to the rest that are sitting elsewhere in the world or in the country. So we cater for both formats during that module. And I typically have about 180 plus students in my class, and that is quite intensive. I stand in front of this class then for full 5 days, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the evening. Yeah, so it's quite tiring, but I enjoy it. It's a very different group of students because they're very much engineers. Only a handful of them have work experience. So yeah, it's a little bit of different ball game there. Then the other module that I spend a lot of time on and I know really well is I teach project management on our structured masters in engineering management program. These are all, as I said, part-time students, so they're working full-time. They're early to mid-career engineers and scientists. There's typically between 120 to last year I had 210 students in my class, and I teach them hybrid. So it's pre-recorded lectures that they get every week they get a new lecture, and they have to watch the lecture in that week. And then I have webinars with them on Saturday mornings where we kind of follow a flipped classroom approach where we take on the more challenging topics that they have. So at the moment, those are the two sort of modules that I teach in project management. What I also want to point out is the faculty-wide one is presented at two different levels. So at a 700 level, which is in South Africa, we've got an honors level. So after you've done 4 years, a bachelor's degree in engineering, your 5th year is what we call an honors year. It can be a standalone degree, or it can be the first year of your master's. So I teach it at a 700 level and at an 800 level, which is at a master's level. So that makes it uniquely challenging in that the students are all in the same class, but I assess them at different levels. And I'm the only lecturer for both of those modules. As I said, my main teaching context is the MEM program, as we call it. I said it's early to mid-career engineers and scientists. We currently have just under 300 students on this program scattered across 3 year groups. I currently teach project management to the first years in the 2nd semester. So how it works in South Africa, our academic year runs from January to December. So we've literally just started our academic year for 2025. Our first semester runs from January to July, and then the 2nd semester from July to December. And the project management module would come in July to December is when I teach them. Very much a younger cohort of students, but they all, they're typically at least half of them are under the age of 40, but it's a big spread. We also have some very senior guys. So this is nice because the younger ones learn from the older guys in the class, but it's also challenging from a teacher's point of view because you need to make sure everyone walks away feeling, this was worth it, and I know more than what I knew coming into this, because some are very experienced project managers, others have only heard about project management, and you've got both sorts of students in your class, which can sometimes be a bit challenging. My students, as I said, I teach hybrid because our students sit all across the world, many in the SADC region. About 70% are South African students. Only 35% are from the province of the Western Cape, where the university is located. So as you see, many students are sitting elsewhere in the country. We have a lot of students that are South African citizens, but they're sitting in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands and Belgium. We have big groups of students there, but we also have in various other countries, Botswana, Cameroon, we've got some in Canada, New Zealand, which is a challenge with time zones, USA, your various African countries, Saudi Arabia as well. So yes, we have to kind of cater for all of these different needs and locations. Most of our students, they have to have an engineering or science-based background. So they typically come from your more engineering organizations. So also defense, petrochemical, state-owned enterprises, governmental, fintech, research and development, fast-moving consumer goods and utilities. So very much more strong engineering backgrounds and organizations in which they find themselves, but they are often very much exposed to project management in those contexts, and very few of them have had previous experience or training in project management, which also makes it quite challenging. So just very generally, in South Africa, we sit with very large classes. We've got a massive need for education. We've got a very young population. Most of our population's under the age of 30. Vastly different educational backgrounds, in the sense that we've got a very divided education sector. If you're able to afford it, you can get very good education, but the government or the poorer students have very poor education. And this, we obviously also see this at a postgrad level, where the foundations have been laid correctly, the students really excel and they're really valuable. And that's why many of our students get poached by overseas companies to work there. But then there's also those that are really lacking in as an academic and a lecturer, it's difficult to fill those gaps that they might not have that might not have been addressed at a basic education level. So that's really a challenge. We also have very few project management academics and lecturers in the country, and lecturers in general. So that's why we tend to have these very big classes that we are responsible for, and we have to do all aspects, administration, assessment, teaching, everything is on, you have to do. We teach both in person and hybrid. Very heterogeneous group of students, kind of already covered that. People from different backgrounds, levels of experience, and exposure to project management. And here are just some photos of, this is not particularly my MEM students. We have networking events for our students twice a year, once a year up in Gauteng, and the second half of the year we have it down here in the Western Cape or Cape Town area, and then they socialize, and then we often just take photos of those that attend. And so you can get an idea of how our students actually look. And these are all postgraduate students on the master's program. Typically in South Africa, most universities use Moodle or Blackboard as their learning management system. What I've noticed is that it's really important that our LMS is mobile compatible. In South Africa, almost everyone has a cell phone, but less people have access to a computer. So they're accessing their material and their content and all the academic information via their mobile phones. Also, we don't have that. We don't often, we sometimes have electricity interruptions, and the internet can be unstable in certain areas that are more remote. So the content must always be possible to download the content and view it offline. That's really important for our students. So there can't be too much synchronous interaction just because the internet is unstable. They have poor electricity supply, things like that play a big role. We typically also on the MEM program don't really make use of prescribed textbooks. We mainly use articles, both conference and journal papers as the prescribed material, which they can access through the library website. So they don't need to go and look for hard to find books and purchase those books. What I've found from a teaching point of view is I find we're teaching a new generation of students. And what appeals to these students is novelty. They like being led by their own curiosity, and I've tried to utilize that in how I teach project management. I've also seen you need to provide them with open-ended problems. It challenges them a lot because they're used to the sort of traditional way of learning. You've got a textbook, and there's questions at the end of the textbook, and there's answers to those questions. Real life doesn't work like that. And they need to learn to deal with that. These open-ended problems where there's not one specific answer and you kind of have to struggle to get to that answer is what you need to challenge them with. And an out-of-box presentation format. So because I deal a lot with engineers and I'm teaching engineers, they are drawn to written reports and things like that because it's very impersonal. And our engineers in South Africa, or our technical people, we've got a big skills gap. Typically, they're only engineers for about 1 to 2 years, and then they're thrust into management in whichever organization they're in. Because if an engineer seems very competent, they're immediately pushed into management, and I need to prepare them for that. And the biggest part about management is the strength of your interpersonal skills. And engineers tend to shy away from interacting with people or being able to stand in front of a class and pitch their ideas and do an elevator pitch. So I try challenge this and help them grow in that part of themselves because I tend to find that they struggle with that. And I've just found this focus on novelty and curiosity has really been good because it sparks their interest in the topic. It increases their engagement because I'm also dealing with a hybrid setup where they're engaging with the content sometimes asynchronously. It enhances their motivation because keep in mind they're part-time students. They've got a lot on their plate. In terms of the curiosity, I find it drives their active learning. It promotes deep understanding. It helps them foster critical thinking. And it leads to high academic achievement because it encourages them to seek answers to their own questions and explore concepts independently. We always tell these students when they start off, this is the start of lifelong learning. You're never going to stop learning. We're going to give you the tools that you can learn your lifelong and know where to access the resources and go on this journey. So that's particularly my approach. In terms of learning and assessment on the MEM program, they have 5 assessment opportunities in project management. So they start off with a pre-module assignment, which they do individually. That is an infographic. I found this very useful tool. I'll show you now a few examples of the infographic. Then they have 14 weekly reflections because the semester is broken up into 15 weeks of lectures. Every week, an hour-long lecture is released. They watch that lecture. They then can't just passively sit back and just take in everything they learned. They actually need to engage with the content. So we require them to do a reflection on their learnings. So at the end of that week, they have to tell me, what did they learn? What was valuable to them? And they almost have to write up their notes from that lecture. That we call the weekly reflection. Early on, I also encourage them, they always put into a group, typically 5 to 6 students. They work on all the group assignments in the same group. They expected early on to provide us with a group charter. That I always explain to them is like their house rules. How is their group going to function? How are they going to deal with conflict? When will they be meeting? How will they distribute the workload? What will they do if they need to make a decision about something? So I found that a very, very useful tool, that you have less issues later on in the module, where if there's in terms of conflicts in groups, if they've got this chart in place, often they won't bother you when they struggle to get along, or there's this harmony in the group. Then they do 3 group assignments. The first group assignment, I give them a podcast challenge. They have to record a podcast on a particular topic, and I'll share with you an example of that shortly. Then the second group assignment is a project management challenge. So I take something that they all may be familiar with, a local event that everyone would be aware of if they're from South Africa, and they must do the whole project management plan for that as a group. And then the third group assignment is a Harvard Business Review case study. Typically, I try focus on their use of project management software in this case study. So they do a bit more technical work. They have to schedule the project or do some analysis on the project using project management software, because many of them say they would like to learn that, how to use the software in the course. And then I conclude with a final individual assignment, which consists of a consolidated reflection of their learnings over the last 15 weeks of lectures, as well as a more leadership or project management focused case study question, where I give them a whole case study and I ask them shorter questions about that case study. Then there's another case study that focuses more on the technical aspect of project management, like a bit of scheduling questions, that kind of thing. And then it concludes with an agile or adaptive methodology question that they typically apply in their own work environment to their own work projects. Yes, so that's typically the final individual assignment. So now I'll be sharing with you some examples of what I've been talking about. So with the MEM program, they're all expected to do these weekly reflections. So we use Teams for that. So they're all added to the module's Teams page. And as you can see there, I had 209 students in my class, and every week they would then submit their reflection. And there's rubrics that we use to mark their reflection. It basically consists of 2 parts. One is they reflect on their learning for the week. The second part is they need to find a recent paper on that topic that we've discussed that week and submit that paper. And then I share with them this consolidated list of papers, so that's I've like kind of narrowed down their continuous learning in this direction for them, providing them this list of papers on this topic that they've all kind of contributed towards, and then they get a mark for doing that, and we can give them feedback in this way. And so what's really powerful about this and why we do this is also so that we can keep tabs to know who is still, as we say, on the bus and who's fallen off the bus. Because with part-time students, often they just disappear. So these weekly reflections help me to keep my finger on, who's struggling and who's still okay. So the ones that don't submit the weekly reflection, we then contact them and hear, how they're doing, how can we help them get back on track. Because we want them to be successful and work through the module. And it's important that they do these reflections. So it really helps from that point of view. And we're busy building dashboards so that we've got better visibility of this as a more proactive measure for measuring engagement. This is just an example of how such a reflection might look. So sometimes they attach a document in which they've now written their own, sorry, let me just do a laser pointer here. Their own little notes on what we covered that week, what they felt was useful, not so useful. And then we've got the rubric attached and we can then mark it and return it to the students. And what's nice then is at the end of the course, they've then got 15 weeks worth of reflections, which is their notes from the whole module, personalized for them. For their context, which they only see the value of it right at the end. During the case, they always moan about these reflections, but afterwards, they always see the value in it. And it helps them recall what they've learned, because sometimes one sits passively and listens, but as soon as you expect it to now, engage with the content and say, but what did I actually learn here? Then it's a whole different story. Then in terms of the infographic, so as I said, that is their pre-module assignment that they do on their own. I like using infographics, and here's a good example. So this student did on the Manhattan Project. He looked at parallel approaches and simultaneous exploration as a sort of main theme in that Oppenheimer movie, which was all about the Manhattan Project. And I thought it was really, really impressive, because my only sort of instruction to them was, go and think about and identify some aspect or topic in the field of project management that you've always wanted to learn more about. And then they need to find 2 recent journal or conference papers on the topic and 2 gray literature sources, so websites or blogs. And then they need to summarize these sort of 4 resources into one infographic. And they really struggle with this, because they like written assignments because they can just dump a whole lot of information. This requires them to sit back and think, okay, but what's the real essence of the message I want to communicate and what I've learned. So it really forces them to do that in an attractive way, and to simplify things. It's easier to complicate things than to simplify things. And students remember images. So I also award a badge. I use a lot of badges in my course, who are the top 10 in terms of the best infographics. And then I share that with the rest of the class. They can then go learn from each other and see what their peers did. So here's just some examples of some of the infographics I received, which I thought were pretty good. And I know it's a little bit small to see, but I just felt them very valuable. And they always provide the references at the bottom as hyperlinks, so you can then immediately go access those papers. Yeah, so and this is really curiosity led, what they want to learn something about. Then in terms of the podcast, so their first group assignment is to choose a topic. I typically give them 4 different topics. The first is the project management competencies one needs to succeed in South African projects, or you can choose the competencies a project manager needs for the future world of work, or do or should your project management competencies change as your career progresses. And then the 4th one in this year was project management leadership competencies for the 4th to 5th industrial revolution. As a group, they pick one of those topics and they need to go put together a podcast of about 15 minutes long. They need to research the content for that podcast, plan, record, and produce the podcast. And they can use whichever format they want for this podcast. They can have a panel discussion or have experts, whatever they choose. So here's just an example. They really, I found that if you not that prescriptive and you just see what you get, it's actually amazing what they do. It's really impressive. So I'm just going to play you the first minute or so of this podcast that the one group did.
On the horizontal axis, creating a visual representation of a plan over time, thereby inventing what we call the Gantt chart today. Although they applied the tool in production environments for resource planning, the Gantt chart quickly became a cornerstone of project management as the discipline formalized in the middle of the 20th century. This is a podcast about finding more of those cornerstones. Welcome to the Gantt Experience. The Gantt Experience.
Welcome back to the Gantt Experience podcast. We explore all the facets of project management. My name is Inere, and with me in the studio is my co-host, Lindsay. The Gantt Experience is all about sharing stories from the front lines and interviewing people that don't just talk about project management, but actually do the work. So, what have we got planned for today, Lindsay?
Hi, Henriette, and hello to all our listeners from across the multiverse. Today we have an interesting topic to discuss. What are the future competencies that a project manager would need for the future world?
Okay, so that's just a brief extract of that podcast, but I was really just blown away with sorry, let me just quickly carry on from there. So I just thought it was really novel. They even had that little slideshow and everything, which it wasn't required of them, but they really did a very professional job, and I'm always inspired by them. And then in terms of the third group assignment, I use the Harvard business cases. So there I've found that with project management students, as they're not MBA type students, they're not used to the case study approach. So I typically always provide them with a tutorial about how to do case study based questions, or how to answer it, or how to evaluate such questions. So they do a tutorial on it first, and then they work through those questions as a group. What I must say, and it will come up again in my conclusion, is that there's very few African focused case studies available, and this is really a gap that I think we should address in future. I've just found that there's certain nuances in the South African context that are not covered in some of these case studies. And then just very briefly, the other group assignment that they do is where they plan a local event. So it could be they planning the South African Rugby World Cup tour to the Rugby World Cup, or the Two Oceans Marathon, or the Cape Town Cycle Tour, and then the group has to then do the whole project management plan behind that. And that's also quite challenging for them from a technical aspect. So just to kind of conclude in terms of these examples, all of these examples I mark online through Turnitin using rubrics, because I can then very quickly mark so many students. Typically, these have embedded memos for student feedback, and I also can make use of quick mark comments and voice notes to give them feedback, which I find useful. So this is an example of how these rubrics look. So I can see the sort of plagiarism score and the AI report, which is becoming so important these days. And then the rubric is a kind of a sliding scale, where I remind myself, okay, what is the question I asked them? How much does that question count towards the total? And then typically under the excellent column, I'll tell them sort of what I wanted as kind of the memo answer as such, what I was looking for in their answer. And then you kind of select the correct blocks. Those are the ones in blue, and then it pulls through to their mark at the end, and then it's immediately in their grade center. I'm just about to conclude. As I mentioned to you, I had about 210 students last year in my class. I asked them to provide a consolidated reflection of their learnings and their key project management learnings from last year. And here's just their top 10 list of what they found valuable as South African students doing a postgraduate module in project management. Most of them said work breakdown structures was something very useful for them. Earned value management, as gives them insights into project tracking. Risk management was useful. Stakeholder management communication, very useful, because in a South African context, many of our students are in a construction environment, and we have construction mafia in this country. So it's basically like these gangs of people that would invade your site and demand that you pay them for you to be able to continue working on site. And stakeholder management is key element, particularly in the construction infrastructure environment in South Africa. So for that reason, I think they appreciated this content. Agile project management they found very useful and novel. Project selection and decision making. Many of them are involved in their company's selection of projects, so they found they now at least knew how that works and how those decisions should be made. And then scope and baseline management. They also particularly found project portfolio management interesting. Many of them saw a career in that as they moved more up in management levels in the organizations. Critical path came up. And then they also enjoyed the more softer side, the organizational theory behind project management. In terms of what they found most relevant for their careers and what they found they could apply in their careers moving forward was resource management in the mining industry, implementing work breakdown structures in proposal development, because most engineers and technical people in South Africa contract, they submit proposals for work, or they contracted to do work. So they found that WBS would help them in that situation. Earned value management for tracking performance, risk mitigation. Again, the stakeholder engagement coming up for infrastructure projects. Agile project management and its applications in manufacturing, cost estimation, communication plans for stakeholder trust, using project selection models, applying PERT for scheduling. And then what stood out to them? So I basically asked them which principles, concepts, or topics stood out to you. They really enjoyed SMART goals in project scope statements, just to make it more practical. So SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. They found that as a useful tool to get a good scope statement. Network diagrams for scheduling, probability impact matrices, stakeholder interest grids to categorize their stakeholders, rolling wave planning. Many of them highlighted this as a key learning for very change-driven environments. Integrated project delivery was valuable, project scoring models, stage gates, resource leveling, and dual operating systems for organizational agility. And then my second last slide is just looking at value assessment. So here they were more telling me, what was their most useful section, or what was the most useful bit that they learned. It was stakeholder communication plans. Most memorable, they all said agile, because many of them had been exposed to traditional project management methodologies, but not agile as much, and they found that very valuable. Most interesting, risk identification and mitigation strategies. Most applicable, earned value management. Most eye-opening was project portfolio management. Most impactful was leadership and team development theories. Most challenging was detailed cost estimation. They didn't like the intense calculations that they had to do here. Least valuable, they said procurement and contract management, and there they mentioned that they felt the section was too general and didn't provide industry-specific insights, but it's sometimes quite tricky because they've from so many different industries, which makes it tough. Least engaging, they said Prince2 and other structured methodologies, as they seem very rigid and less adaptable compared to Agile. Needs improvement, they just felt quality and supply chain management should be covered individually and not together, and a bit more in detail. So in conclusion, what I see as the upside to teaching in South Africa is you have many eager students with a very much a can-do attitude to bettering themselves. They have very strong technical skills, and I think there's a lot of room for real-world project-based learning. We have a lot of societal challenges in the country, and I think these skilled people can really make a difference there. The only challenge I have is how do I do this in a hybrid format or with students that are attending class online across the world is challenging. The downside I find, generative AI and assessment, how to use that in a constructive fashion, like how do I cater for it? Because it's very pervasive. As I said, there's a gap in terms of African project management case studies. The professionalization of project management in South Africa is quite lacking, and I'm hoping that that will improve over time. We have a IPMA member association here in South Africa, as well as PMI, so it's growing, but it's still very small. And then there's also very few project management researchers and lecturers, so hopefully that grows over time. And that's all from me. I'll now open it up for any questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Taryn. Very interesting. So new ideas about podcast, for example, it's very interesting. And I see that you're using a lot of tools for engagement and different films, topics, and so on, and artificial intellect. And our participants have a few questions. First of all, about engineers, that sometimes engineers have some trouble with communicate with other people. Who knows why? Maybe because it's his teaching process. And the question about this, as a professor, what do you think is responsible for this? Is it about how the engineering course or curricular flame for work is made? What's the reason?
That they're not that keen to engage interpersonally.
Yeah.
I think it's just their personalities, how they've been trained at university. In South Africa, you've got very much traditional engineering education. You know, your curriculum is full of, you know, the hard sciences, maths, physics, very much you're doing it on your own, not a lot of project-led work. So I think it's just ingrained in them. I think they're also more introverted by nature. And then when they're thrust into organizations, they're expected to be leading and be extroverts. And I think it's that challenge. But they're actually very much aware of it. They actually come to us and say, you know, we realize this is what we struggle with. We want to be challenged. And that's why they always pleasantly surprise me. Very introverted students really come out of their shells during these courses. But what I do find that helps a lot is to fast track that, is to have informal engagement opportunities. So we have chapters in different countries where they can get together with other students on the program and socialize, get to know each other. We have networking brunches that we do with them. We've got interesting speakers that come and talk, so that they first develop informal relationships with each other. Then it just makes it so much easier to work together on the program.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's interesting. Also, question from Ecuador. Do you consider that your current course format is based on problem-based learning or project-based learning?
Project or problem? I would say it's more project-based learning, but it is all done in a more online format. I think what I think is sometimes lacking is that they get their hands actually dirty. Like one of my ideas for my faculty-wide project management module, where I see the students on campus in front of me, is I'm going to identify a few NGOs in my vicinity, and I'm going to ask the students to go and engage with those NGOs, identify a project that those NGOs require, and they must then do that project free of charge. And because I think the students, they like things being spelled out for them. You know, this is the project, this is the scope. I find half your battle is if you're able to scope a project properly and engage properly with the stakeholders. So they learn the most if you sort of say to them, go speak to that NGO, find out what they need, see how you can meet their needs, and you go scope that project and engage with the stakeholder. I found they learn a lot that way. So that's my intention with my face-to-face class, is to do that more in future. And I think it's got a double benefit. The student learns from it, and also we're giving back to society, which I feel is so valuable, and they learn a lot from that.
Super. There is a few questions which I like because I think that something you need to ask them, and we have that. How is AI integrated into project management at universities? You mentioned about AI tools, and could you provide an example of AI tools that enhance productivity, especially considering the large number of students you work with?
So from the students' point of view, they don't really use, well, they use AI in the form of ChatGPT sometimes, and that's what we try and always have to be one step ahead. We do sometimes allow them to use AI, but particularly in the final assessments, we don't allow for it. More in terms of, so what we do, how we do tell them they may use it. They may use ChatGPT to find suitable sources, but it can't answer the question for them. So they can use it to help narrow down where they should look for information, but they can't use it to answer the question. From an academic point of view, we have a sister program in data science running concurrently to ours. And my colleagues there are in the process of developing generative AI tools to help with assessments from the lecturer's point of view, that you can almost train this tool to mark the way you do and to do a lot of this mass marking for you that you then just go and almost check, sample how it marked and any problem cases. So from the lecturer's point of view, that's what I'll be investigating next is those kind of tools, developing those kind of tools. We're also developing chat bots, generative AI tools to help us with program administration. Because our students are sitting all across the world, if one student has a question, then all 200 of them have a question to handle those mass volume of similar questions. We're using in that way. Those are the main ways I've seen it used and how I'm thinking of using it. If you've got ideas for me, I'm very open to hearing them.
It's a huge question. I think it's a huge question for all teachers, not only about project management, but in general, because I see that AI can change university dramatically, but not today. Hopefully, not today.
Yes.
Okay.
What we did do, sorry, I just want to add, we did a very extensive survey last year on our MEM students on how they're using ChatGPT or generative AI, which tools are they using, how are they using it, what do they see the university and the program team's role is in that. And one of the main findings from that study, which will be published later this year, is that they're very eager to actually receive training from the university on generative AI, how it should be used, correct ways of using it, incorrect ways of using it. So they're actually looking to the universities for guidance and they want to be trained properly on these tools. But what I have found is that in South African context, the companies, particularly the private sector companies, are actually saying to their employees, you must use generative AI. It's saving you time. It's saving us money. So you need to learn how to use it properly. So they're being forced by their companies to use generative AI in their work. And that's why they feel it should also become part of the syllabus that they trained on how to use it going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Some colleagues told that they have the same experience in different parts of the world. I see these comments from Tampere University from Finland. Thank you that you also share your experience. And more question regarding theoretical aspect seems missing. So what do you think how it can be imparted?
So we typically follow very much a flipped classroom approach. We give them the lecture focuses very much on the theoretical aspects. Every lecture also has a prescribed reading list where they have to go read journal papers on the topic and engage with the theory. The reflection side focuses on the theoretical relevance of what they've learned, but also practical relevance. What we've realized in South Africa, particularly the students we train, very few of them, I'm literally talking about 1%, want to end up in academia. They all want to go back into their organizations and make a difference through their organizations in industry. So for them, it's so valuable. So we really always have to focus quite strongly on, okay, what of this is of practical relevance to you, and make them reflect on that and also apply their learnings, and they find that very useful. So we do focus on theory, but we have to always try help them see how they can use that in their own organizations and industries.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And the local question about podcast quality. What about student podcast quality? Would they able to do this assignment in true spirit? How it's really interesting, how it's really podcast, or it's more about their reflection?
So for this podcast, a concern I had was that they're just going to read a script that they've generated with ChatGPT. So I included a measurement item in my assessment rubric where I assess the quality of how natural the podcast sounded. So as soon as because I said to them, remember, you've got an audience, you need to think about the audience. You are there to entertain and educate the audience. We also have this principle in our program. We actually borrowed it from the medical faculty. They've got this principle of see one, do one, teach one. So you see it, someone lectures the concept to you, you do it yourself, and then you teach one. And the podcast, I feel, assists them with the teach one philosophy of, okay, what is my understanding of this? Can I explain to you what I understand about this topic in my own words? And so that's been my view, and to focus on the naturalness, how naturally they present the podcast is what I now assess them on, and how they engage with each other, and how well they can apply it, that they're not just reading the theory, but they can actually have insights in terms of how to apply it in their own context and find relevant examples from their work environments to support it.
Very interesting. And also one question about hybrid format. Teaching large group of part-time students hybrid is a demanding setup. It's completely true. How do you handle group work dynamics for hybrid PM teams, part of your assessment?
Yes. So as I said, main go-to is a group charter. I give them examples and I explain to them the theory behind team charters, as they're also known in project management literature. So I give them example and they go generate such a document for themselves. Very practical. They submit it for extra credit. So at the end of the semester, if someone's struggling to get a distinction or struggling to pass, I look, did that group submit a team charter, and I see if that can help them. And I've found just that opportunity to put together a group or team charter at the beginning eliminates most of your issues that you have with virtual teams, because in that group charter, they need to think about, okay, we're on different time zones. When are we all going to meet? And how are we going to all make sure it works for everyone? So I do often have students that moan, this one's sitting in New Zealand and I'm sitting here and we can't find a time that suits both of us. But that's the world of work. You don't choose who you get to work with. You're sometimes going to be put in a group with people, very different backgrounds, ideas about things. And so we try and encourage that learning through putting them in quite diverse groups. But that group charter up front really helps a lot to streamline how the groups function, that there's not too much hassles regarding group work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of job with different groups. I can imagine this. It's really hard work. Also, interesting question. I suppose it's a hot discussion about this. Maybe sometimes it's some hype question about AI, but very interesting your point of view about this. There is palpable fears of the advent of AI, that it will take away jobs from people. How does this assertion affect project managers? What do you think?
I tell them and I explain to my students, AI is here to stay, and it's a tool the same way the calculator was a tool, but it's still just a tool. You're putting information into it and you're getting information out of it. What we need to train you to do is to critically assess the information that's coming out of it and the reliability of that information. So we try see how they can still, even with AI, still keep their job. So we look at the skills that are in demand for the future world of work. So creativity. So I feel the fact that they're doing these infographics, the podcasts, elevator pitches. So in our one module, they do a Shark Tank pitch of 2 minutes to a panel of venture capitalists regarding business plans that they have to put together for a technology startup company. And I feel by bringing in those competencies or those skills like creativity, boosting their creativity skills, there'll always be a need for that, because generative AI just does what you tell it to do. I think creativity and bringing different things together, synthesizing different things and creating something new, there'll always be space for people that are well trained in being able to do that. And also, I think the focus in the future will be much more on the human aspect of things. working and being with other people and getting things done with other people. So I actually think project management is going to shift in focus. In the past, it was very much on the technical side of project management. Can you do the schedule correctly and is the schedule accurate? To more, how do you manage the team and the interpersonal side of making sure it's a high performing collaborative team. So that's why I feel that is something we need to focus on as project management lecturers, is developing those skills in our students. Can they work well with others?
Absolutely agree. We need to be more people
Mm-hmm.
about our interaction. Okay,
Yes.
one more technical question. A lot of people ask about your presentation. Can we share this presentation after?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, super.
Oh, sure. So long as it doesn't land up somewhere else, that it's only for, that's fine. I'm happy to share because I feel we're all in the same boat and we can all learn so much from each other. That if there's something that I do that you can maybe use, if it's for the betterment of project management education, then I'm all for it. I think we can, many minds make light work, or many hands make light work, so we can all learn from each other. Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you. And I see some question about our technical things, but we have these governments about this format. Sorry, friends, we can change this. I see one more question. The final point. Presentation. Okay. Super. I see that we have a lot of comments, not question, but comments. Okay. Thank you, Taryn. It's a really great experience, and thank you for your readiness. It was super interesting. I really can't catch the time when the time is covered, and it was like 1 minute, but it's 40 minutes now, 1 hour finished. It's super fast, to be honest. Thank you, dear participants, for your question and for your comments. It's really very nice. And I want to say that you know that we have some badges after these webinars in IPMA, and you will receive badges in 1 week. Be attention in your emails. And also after webinars will be a short survey. Please fill it out because your feedback very important for us. And of course, see you next time. Join us and don't miss info about all events and opportunities. And it was really so nice to hear some voice from South Africa. But I really a little confused about 34 degrees. Yeah, 34 degrees. It's amazing.
Degrees Celsius.
It's amazing weather and super nice experience. Thank you.
Yes, you're all welcome here to come visit me in sunny South Africa.
Okay, friends, we have this
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thank you for hosting. Bye, everyone.